Welcome to BioIT World's Trends from the Trenches podcast, your insider's look at the science, technology, and executive trends driving the life sciences. I'm Allison Proffitt, editor of BioIT World. This episode is hosted by Stan Gloss, founder of BioTeam, a life sciences IT consulting company at the intersection of science, data, and technology. Joining Stan today is Efosa Ojomo, author of The Prosperity Paradox: How Innovation Can Lift Nations Out of Poverty. Ojomo has studied innovation, how to assess what consumers and non-consumers need, and how data metrics can help. He and Stan discuss how all he's learned can apply to business and beyond. Let's listen in.
Efosa, thank you so much for joining me on our podcast today. I'm doing a little something different than I've done in my previous podcasts, where I usually talk to executives of pharmaceutical companies and researchers and all of this. But today, I actually read a book that you wrote called The Prosperity Paradox, and it resonated with me, this book about prosperity and how to create prosperity. I saw a parallel that I thought we could draw today for the audience and bring some of your concepts that you have in the book, because I think they apply to life sciences research and doing that. So maybe we could start off by having you introduce yourself and kind of talking a little bit about your background and the work that you've been doing in the Christensen Institute.
Thank you very much, Stan. It's really my pleasure to be here with you. Glad to be talking with your audience here. I have had the pleasure to work at the Christensen Institute since 2016. I was Clay Christensen student while I was getting my MBA at Harvard Business School. One of the most amazing pleasures of my life was to meet him at business school. And his class, which was at the time the most popular second-year course at Harvard, Building and Sustaining a Successful Enterprise, changed the way I think, changed the way I saw the world. And I just wanted to, work with him for as long as I could. And I had the pleasure to do that until he passed away. At the Institute, I lead the Global Prosperity group, and our job is to use Christensen's theories, frameworks, and models to help us better understand this complex world of global development, poverty alleviation efforts, and ultimately how to create prosperity. As you mentioned, we were fortunate to publish a book in 2019 called The Prosperity Paradox. The core idea, yes, sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
You got it. I was just going to ask you if you could kind of tell us a little bit about the core idea of that book.
Yeah, just a quick story, because I think that the core idea will come to life after you hear this. I'm originally from Nigeria, came to the U.S. in 2000 for college. After college, I got a job as an engineer, and life was good in America. I mean, I didn't go back. I didn't have plans to go back. But then 2008, I started reading books on development, poverty, economics, and it really gripped me like nothing had ever gripped me before. I'm talking about, I'm staying up till 2, 3 in the morning, reading these books, and I go to work the next day, talking to people about what I'm learning. I can't shut up about it. And I said, I got to do something about it. Well, much of what I was reading essentially told me the way to solve these problems is you start a nonprofit, you help as many people as you can, and you move on. And that's what I did. I started a nonprofit with some friends, started going back home to Nigeria during my vacations, and I seemed to be doing one or two things well. We'd build wells, we'd fund some school programs. I mean, things seemed to be going well. But then after about 6 months of building the first well, it broke. I get a call. I'm back in the U.S. working, and I get a call. Well's broken, And I'm like, man, how do we fix this? There was just no mechanism to go into the community to fix the well. Anyways, I was lucky enough to get somebody to go in, paid a contractor. He went in. But after he went into a remote village, it seemed like there wasn't enough money to pay him to go back. Well, this happened about 5 times where we would build a well, it would break, and then it would be difficult to go back in to fix it. And I realized something was wrong with that model. Something was broken. And if you step back a little bit, I'm a small organization building wells, right? So perhaps we spent $50,000, $60,000 building 5 wells. So one could argue, well, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of money wasted when you look at the hundreds of billions of dollars of development money going to different countries. But if you step back and look at the development industry, it's designed to do something similar. Metaphorically and literally, in many cases speaking, many organizations go into communities without truly understanding the mechanism that will cause whatever they do to be sustainable, and they build wells. They build literal wells. Metaphorically speaking, they build, other wells, whether you build schools, hospitals, roads, things like that. And it's nice and flashy in the beginning, but ultimately it breaks down. And you cannot quite sustain these things. And I started working with Clay Christensen, and he helped me see a couple of things. The first is many organizations are designed to solve poverty, to fight poverty. But I never met anybody who, after they escape poverty, they have a party. Whoever defined what poverty was, they have a party and say, I'm no longer living in poverty. I'm still really poor, but I'm no longer living in poverty as defined by, say, the World Bank. So we were sort of missing the point. People are not living to escape poverty. People are living so they can enjoy prosperity. They can enjoy human flourishing, a decent standard of living. They can enjoy life. And that was a fundamental reset for me because it helped me see that much of the dollars going into development was going to prop up development numbers. And so you go into a community, you build a school, you build a well, and those numbers, the development numbers go up. How many wells per person? How many students are in school? How many clinics are in this community? But if you step back and ask, how many students are learning? How many students have jobs or opportunities after they graduate? How many students have enough money to go from primary school to secondary school and then to university? How many doctors work at these clinics? Do they have access to medications? Do they have access to supplies? Are these clinics that I would confidently send my kids?
Mm-hmm.
You begin to get very different answers.
Right.
But here's the thing, Stan, the data, the numbers are positive. They're up and to the right. But the core of what you're trying to do, the mission, the focus is completely off. And no country illustrates this in recent history more than Afghanistan. If you look at Afghanistan over the past 20, 25 years, the development numbers have been going up and to the right. I mean, you look at number of kids in school, you look at governance numbers, you look at gender equality, maternal mortality. And I mean, pick a development number, close your eye, pick a number, and it's up and to the right in Afghanistan. But then what happened after the U.S. and allies pulled out in the fall of 2021? Well, it turns out all those numbers dropped. And now, as I'm talking to you, Stan, your audience would know if you're a woman in Afghanistan, As far as I understand, you can no longer enroll in college.
Yeah.
And so that's a case of where the data is saying one thing, but the core foundation upon which the data is built uh, is really saying another thing. The phenomena is not the data.
Right.
And Clay really helped us understand that and taught us what we should be focusing on instead.
Yeah. So I want to tie this back to the life sciences industry that we see. We see many large commercial companies investing in large scale projects like they call it digital transformation, or we're going to build, for a while, we were building a lot of data lakes and we were doing many kinds of big projects and being able to say, for instance, we have 10 petabytes of data in our data lake. That's a good statistic that's up in the right as you described it. But the question is, what data is in there, and is it usable by the scientist to actually do some research? So this idea that we invest in some of these metrics that we're using, our proxy metrics, they're not the real metrics that we want, but they're, representation that allows everybody to feel good
Yeah.
about what we've invested in, but has it really yielded a result that really matters? So, I mean, imagine you have a data lake and scientists, yet everybody's still thirsty. That. So that gets us to one of the concepts in the book that I love, and maybe we can talk about that, is this, this looking for ways to solve issues of non-consumption. And what that gets us from an innovation standpoint. So maybe we can talk a little bit about non-consumption and what that is and how it shows up.
Brilliant. Yes. So one of the things Clay was incredibly brilliant at was simplifying really complex things. So when you think about an economy and what it is, it's so complex. It's a government, taxes, corporations, civil society, schools, hospitals, inflation, central bank. There's just so much going on. And from an innovator's perspective, that can be overwhelming. But if you step back and you simplify things just a little bit and say, every economy by and large is made up of consumers and non consumers. There are people who consume medical devices, there are people who consume pharmaceuticals, there are people who consume education services, who consume cars, roads. I mean, they're just people who consume. And then there are people who don't consume. Now, the folks who don't consume, but their lives would be better if they were to consume, are called non-consumers. Now, and the phenomena is called non-consumption. Most market research, the analysis, the data that we get looks at the consumption economy. It looks at what people consume. If we even think about it, you say, how many iPhones did Apple sell last year? And we use that to project how many they might sell next year. How many cars did Toyota sell? How many computers did Lenovo or Dell sell? How many books did an author sell? So we are focused, almost always focused on the consumption economy. It's the data we can see. It's the data we can measure. It's very similar to that data lake you talk about. We're looking at it intensely, right? We see it. We want to just analyze the death out of it. And we are not looking at or considering non-consumption. We're not trying to understand, well, what about the people or the systems that are not consuming? What's happening to them? What are the barriers to consumption? Oftentimes, the barriers we think are money. It's just like they're too poor to consume, or they have no interest because their income is not up to a particular level. But that's not quite true. There are several other barriers, such as access. Right? Maybe they do have the money, but whatever they are supposed to be consuming or want to consume is just not close by. It's not easily accessible. That's a barrier. Time is another barrier. It just takes too much time to consume. And so
Mm-hmm.
they write the consumption decision off. Or skill. It requires way more skill than they're willing to learn, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not gonna consume. Now, to sort of bring this to light, there's a company called Micro Insure that we wrote about, and this company has gone to insure a little over 100 million people. Even since we wrote the book, at the time we wrote the book, I think there were about 60 something million. But you can think of insurance. Who in their right mind would wake up and want to sell insurance to some of the poorest people in the world, in Zambia or Nigeria, Ghana, some of the really poor African countries? Well, there was a guy by the name of Richard Lefley who said, yes, they may not have money the same way I might have money. He's from the UK, or an American customer, but the circumstances in which they live their lives, where they are prone to unexpected events, accidents, and that decimates them, tells me they are non-consumers of insurance because their lives would be better if they had access to this product.
Mm-hmm.
Cutting the long story short, Leftley dove in, try to understand these non-consumers, and designed a product that they consumed in droves. And so today, like I said, upwards of about 100 million folks and counting. But I think it takes that kind of mindset to say, I'm not just going to look at the consumption economy. I'm going to understand the barriers to consumption. Then I go back to the innovation drawing board, redesign a product or service that helps people consume better. And I think that mindset is key in every industry if we are to make progress.
Right. When I was reading the book, you talked about the non-consumption issues and then the types of innovation that were associated
Yes.
with this. So you mentioned 3 types of innovation in the book. One was market creating innovation, sustainability innovation, and efficiency innovation. Why? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about those types, how that aligns to those types of innovation.
Absolutely. So, yeah, as you said, market creating innovations are innovations that target non-consumption and make products and services accessible to non-consumers. And so the example with the insurance product that targeted non-consumers and created a market for insurance, that's non-consumption. Sorry, that's market creating innovation in action.
Mm-hmm.
Sustaining innovations are innovations that make good products better. They are the most common types of innovations. You look around you, and much of what you are using is sustaining in character. So your computer, your phone, your car, most things we use are sustaining. They're good products that have been made better. Now, notice that with sustaining innovations, a company doesn't need to create an entirely new distribution setup, new manufacturing, new warehousing, shipping, and new value chain. They essentially create a new product and plug it into the existing value chain or value network.
Right.
And so you can see how with sustaining innovations, you are whether you want to or not, you are targeting that at the consumption economy.
Mm-hmm.
And with efficiency innovations, These are innovations that make good products cheaper. They don't necessarily pass on the savings to the customers. Instead, they pass it on to the shareholders and back to the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so these innovations are notorious for freeing up cash flows for companies,
Mm-hmm.
making companies incredibly efficient. So whenever you read a company's 10K or annual report, and you hear that the company didn't grow as much, but they increased profits even at a higher rate, you can do the quick math and say they probably invested quite a bit in efficiency innovations. 2022, we saw a lot of companies eliminate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft, it's early 2023 here, talked about eliminating 10,000 jobs. Well, that's an efficiency innovation, and that's going to reduce their cost, and for their sake, I hope increase their profits and increase their cash flows, because they're not going to need to pay all those folks
Right.
anymore. When you outsource operations from one place to another, you leverage some kind of productivity-based software. These are efficiency type innovations. These are good. No innovation is bad in and of itself. But it's important to understand that sustaining and efficiency innovations typically are innovations that are targeted at the consumption economy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can invest in them time and time again and wonder why we are not growing, perhaps exponentially or at a much faster rate. Well, perhaps it's because the consumption economy is somewhat limited,
Mm-hmm.
and so you really, to break through the consumption economy, you have to go to non-consumption, and you need a new business model to do that. And you essentially need market creating innovations, um, not sustaining or efficiency. So those are the three, primarily speaking, I would say those are the three types of innovations that we see around us.
Yeah, I mean, is it fair to say that the market creating innovation is more revolutionary and that the sustaining and the efficiency innovation is evolutionary? So,
Um,
growth like with a market creating opportunity, you can see rapid exponential growth. And I think of how fast something grows. So when you open up a new market and you make the non-consumers consumers, they come in droves
yes.
initially. So you see a big, like hockey shape exponential curve, but eventually it plateaus off. And then now you're kind of moving on from the initial market creating opportunity. Is that a fair representation?
I think it is. I think it is. I mean, yeah, you've hit on something that I often don't talk about. But when you create a new market, um, non-consumers become consumers. So in effect, over time, the non-consumption economy, as a result of your activity to create that new market, becomes a consumption economy,
Mm.
right? It becomes that. And so over time, there's going to be a limit to growth because non-consumers have become consumers. So it is incumbent on us, the innovators, to always be looking out for non-consumption. Because when you create a new market, you're converting non-consumption to consumption. Other people are going to want to take part in the consumption economy because now, remember, they can see it, Stan, they can measure it. They can say, oh, that's going to grow at 3, 4, 5% a year. We're going to be able to make this much profit. With non-consumption, it's very difficult to do that. Facebook at one point almost sold itself to Yahoo for about $1 billion, several years after they had been been around. $1 billion, and people at the time said, uh, Yahoo must be foolish for making this decision because um, Facebook is not worth $1 billion, right? Facebook today, as I'm talking to you, is worth close to $350 billion,
Mm-hmm.
350 billion. And that is the power of market creation.
Mm-hmm.
It is really hard to predict, incredibly difficult. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's just incredibly difficult to predict. Um, when you look at other market creation stories, what you see is something similar. Whether it was the time when um, the head of Digital Equipment Corp, his name is escaping me
Ken,
now,
Ken Olson.
Ken
Olson.
Olson, yes, thank
Yes.
you, um, talked about how, I mean, we like, why would we ever need computers in
Yeah.
our homes, right?
Right.
Or even the storied Bill Gates, perhaps he was misquoted, talked about we never really needed more than I think it was 64K or something of memory. So, the market, when it's created, it's impossible to think about life without it.
Mm.
But before it's created, we really don't know how big it could get, or it's really difficult. And so this sort of leads me into the work that we've started to do now on a sequel to the prosperity paradox, so that we can better understand market creation. And that's really on um, understanding the process of market creation.
Mm.
And one of the things that is critical, Stan, is humility. It's humility to ensure that you're allowing the innovation process play out. You're not coming into the room with the answer. You're coming in with questions, and whatever answers bubble up from those questions help
Mm.
guide the way. And it's a lot easier said than done.
Mm.
It's a lot easier said than done. But market creators come in to learn from others, to learn from the process. And yes, they have preconceived notions. Yes, we have hypotheses. Yes, we have all these things, but we ensure those things do not rule over the innovation process.
Right. That's terrific. That's beautiful. There's one area I want to cover before we finish today. And
Okay.
and I want to ask you, because a lot of the clients that we see at BioTeam and work with have lots of data. In fact, they have abundance of data around
Mhm.
them. So I wanted to get your thoughts about, is it possible to be surrounded by abundance yet suffer from non-consumption?
Um, Absolutely. Absolutely it is. I mean, in fact, there's there's a story that a good friend told me about the guy who was looking for his keys around a light post, and police officer comes to him and says, "Hey, what are you doing out here? It's late. It's late at night." And he says, "I'm looking for my keys." And then he says, "Did you lose them here?" And he says, "No, no, I don't know where I lost them, but this is the only place where I can see light." And so that's why I'm looking. It's the only place that's lit up. Well,
Right.
it turns out that's what you just described. You are swimming in data. There's just an abundance of data ahead of you. Um, in front of you, behind you, this is data. And that data is guiding your questioning. You're not asking, what's the data that we're not seeing? What's the data we're not collecting? When the data informs what you do, There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to make sure you've understood what data you gathered, why you gathered that data, how much of it you gathered, from whom you gathered it, because data we often think is objective, but it's not objective. Clay always said, we create data, and every piece of data tells us things about the past. And so, as insightful as the data analysis tools we have are, I think what's important is making sure we're asking the right questions. And there's a story my brother told me recently about might have been World War I or two, perhaps two, and a lot of Air Force pilots were coming back with shots on their planes, right? Shots on different parts of the planes, and the engineers and the scientists on the ground who received them, and the designers were like, well, maybe we gotta redesign the plane so that they're not so susceptible to shots in these parts of the plane. Well, one of the engineers on the ground said, well, what about the planes that don't come back? And Stan, he realized that the planes that don't come back, they also got shot. It just turns out they got shut down. And so instead of reinforcing the parts of the plane that got shot and the pilots came back, that by asking that question, he realized, oh my gosh, we need to reinforce the parts of the plane that come back and don't get shot. Do you see what I'm saying? Because imagine if, for simplicity's sake, right, the left wing always gets shot, but those guys always come back. But you never quite see a plane come back where the right wing is shot. So nobody's looking at the right wing because the right wing is not shot. And you're looking at the left wing saying, how can we avoid these shots? How can we make the plane more resilient? But this guy says, I think we're looking at the wrong thing. I think we need to reinforce the right wing because those guys never come back.
Right.
And so the data is not going to tell you that. You're not going to see that because, again, it's non-consumption. You don't really see, if the plane doesn't come back, you don't see it. You don't, because if it gets shot, it's going down. But that's the kind of intelligent thinking necessary to make the kind of progress I think many of us hope to make.
Yeah, and I think one of the lessons that we've learned from Clay was that there's a big difference between correlation and causation, and
absolutely.
And really, it's easy to make the correlations of things. It takes asking the right questions to get us to causation.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Efosa. I want to give you a chance if there's anything that you'd like to tell us about where people can find you and the Christensen Institute, and I want to give you a little opportunity to share little things with our audience who want to follow up.
Absolutely, yeah. So ChristensenInstitute.org is where we are. You can follow us on Twitter at Global CCI or Christensen Int. Efosa Ojomo is my name. It's my handle. It's so follow us there. We're working on a sequel to the Prosperity Paradox that we hope really shed some light on the market creation process, and I do hope will be beneficial to many of the folks who listen to your podcast. I want to thank you so much for having me on, Stan. And, can't wait to do one or two good things in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Efosa. And we will have you back on. Let us know when that book is out. I'll be probably one of the first people to read it. Thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to BioIT World's Trends from the Trenches podcast.